Hello, welcome to LSU Unis's online training manual. This manual is designed for those of you who are somewhat new to online instruction, and the intent is to help you to easily and successfully transfer your face-to-face classes to online classes. Um, what I want to do is these videos are going to go through the various sections of the online training manual, adding a little bit of context and discussing some of the things that we are covering. Now, the first thing, if you look in the table of contents, is a section on planning an online course. And just as with any course, the planning is an essential part of this. You're going to have to plan out how you're going to deal with these things before the class begins. Before I get into that, though, let me add another thing. This is a basic tutorial. This is not intended to be in depth, and it may not answer every single question that everyone has. Each discipline has unique challenges as we convert from face-to-face to online, and we can't address all of those different challenges. That being said, I have no doubt that someone in your field has successfully addressed those challenges. So my advice is, instead of panicking, instead of throwing your hands up in the air or lamenting about how impossible some of this is, get on Google and search on Google and see how people have done that. If, for instance, you're dealing with a lab practical in biology, Google teaching lab practical online and see what other people have done. Keep in mind also that online is always going to be different from face-to-face. Using the example of a lab practical, obviously you're not going to be able to have students looking through a microscope. So that kind of test question or test challenge is out. However, I remember my lab practicals when I was in biology 101 and 102. The professor was constantly complaining because he did not have enough room for all of the stations that he wanted to use, and he ended up having to, make sacrifices. The advantage of online is you have all of the time and all of the space you need to ask questions. So there is a give and take with this, and you want to keep that in mind. There are ways of using online to your advantage that you may not have thought about initially. Okay, so that being said, one of the first things that I would suggest that everyone do when they're planning on converting their classes to online is to think about and rethink about their policies. Certain things are going to be very different. For instance, attendance. Attendance is not going to be marked by students just showing up to class. It's going to be marked by student participation in activities, student completion of activities. So you want to make sure to offer clear expectations of when assignments are due and to detail the consequences for failing to meet those deadlines. In a face-to-face class, the general rule everywhere that I've taught is missing more than 10% is unacceptable. So you might want to figure out a similar benchmark for your online classes. Participation, clear expectations for participation need to be spelled out as well. In particular for forums, you want to make sure that students understand what participation means and what it doesn't. Very often you'll have students in a forum who think that they're contributing by just simply stating something like, I agree. and that's not a legitimate contribution to a forum. So you want to spell out what you're looking for. A good rule of thumb is to explain to students that they need to add something substantial to the conversation, not just, echo approval or something like that. Maybe give examples of forums, of forum posts that are good and forum posts that are not good. Email. Students are responsible for keeping themselves updated on class activity. As a result, checking campus email accounts is essential. You want to remind students of this so that they don't forget. Make sure to remind them that they need to check their LSUE email accounts daily. Remind them that this is the only account that we have for them and that they are responsible for that. Another issue that does come up, sometimes students think in an online class that their instructors are going to respond instantaneously. So instructor response time is something that you need to discuss, before the class begins. Spell out the times that you will be available to students so they don't unreasonably expect a response. If a student is working at 2 a.m. in the morning on your class, that's their right. But they don't have the right to expect that you're going to be up and responding to them at 2 a.m. Some of them will expect that. So give them a clear indication of when you will respond. Generally, I tell my students that I will respond within 24 hours during the business week. That way they know that, if they're asking me a question, it's not going to be an instantaneous response. Since these classes are being converted from face-to-face, maybe a good guideline would be to let them know you're going to be available during those hours that were your office hours. Finally, computer problems. Students need to understand that computer problems are never a justifiable excuse for missing or late, or for turning work in late. Be sure to spell that out. Students will tell you their phone died. They'll tell you, that they'll come up with all kinds of excuses. They'll claim that they turned something in, but that it didn't show up. And you need to be clear with them that, those kinds of things are not justifiable excuses. Another thing that I personally do and that I would suggest that everyone do, warn students not to take quizzes or tests on their smartphones. I've had students in the past, their service blinks out for an instant and and my courses boots them out of the test. So, warn them that when it comes to taking tests, when it comes to taking quizzes, they need to have a more reliable connection than, just a signal from their smartphone. So my advice before you begin tackling the class, give some thought to these policies and draft out an amended course policy so that students know what you're looking for, so that they know what is acceptable, and so that they know what is not acceptable.